Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Now you haven't seen me for maybe 2 years, unless you're a new subscriber. You will realize that something has changed here, and I won't dive too deep into that. Let me know though if you wanted to find out more about what inspired me for the different look now. But today I'm going to talk to you about the difference between a graphic designer, a UX designer, and how to make the switch from a graphic designer into a UX designer. Let's dive deep into it. So we get a lot of questions about the difference between graphic and UX designers and how to make the switch. First and foremost, I would start with identifying the different responsibilities and the focus between a graphic designer and a UX designer. So graphic designer focuses on a lot of visually appealing products and designs. It's very visual oriented. Their main goal is really to convey a message that makes an emotional connection with the users, the customers, the audience through visual skills, whether it's graphics, typography, or things like that, which I'll dive deeper later on in this video. Graphic designers are also very close to brand, and so you'll find a lot of graphic designers focusing on things like branding, identity set, and basically how to keep things on brand. A UX designer focuses on the best experience for the users. It depends on what type of product that is, but generally UX stands for user experience, and it's oftentimes targeted to digital products or services, whether it's a website or an application. They also focus on the look and feel, the usability of the product. They do a lot of user research, understanding user journeys as well, and try to identify the best way to optimize the user's experience from a digital design point of view or a user experience design point of view. The other thing that really differentiates the two oftentimes is the output that's being produced by a graphic designer versus a UX designer. A graphic designer oftentimes comes up with, print or digital designs, things like brochures, website or application designs, layouts. Typography is such a big thing for graphic designers. Oftentimes you'll find graphic designers doing things like logos and branding as well. So oftentimes a job will come as a branding identity set where graphic designers will come up with a logo concept, and from there they will roll out into different types of applications like brochures, business cards, and websites and whatnot. UX designers, on the other hand, actually focuses on a whole user journey and understanding what their needs are. So UX designers oftentimes starts with a research process where they'll try and understand what the problem is, and from there they can design a mock-up, work on some interactive prototypes. And another component that is huge on UX design is actually understanding whether the design suits the user, whether it meets the user's needs, and they do that through a series of user testing. There are lots of different platforms to do this and how to do that, but I won't get into it. But essentially, focuses on the user's needs. That's the biggest thing about UX design. And when it comes to skills, a graphic designer focuses on visual design. Typography is a huge thing for a graphic designer. Color theory, layout, composition. Graphic designers use tools that are pretty common in the industry, and you will know this. It's the Adobe Creative Suite. So Adobe Illustrator, Adobe InDesign, Photoshop are very much graphic designer tools, although a lot of graphic designers are picking up digital design tools like Figma as well, because it comes with the needs these days. But traditionally speaking, graphic designers are big on Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. Whereas UX designers, on the other hand, they do a lot of user research, as I was saying earlier. They focus on information architecture, wireframing, prototyping. So as you can tell, it's very much digital design based. And they use tools like Figma, which is oftentimes used as a graphic designer's tool as well, but Figma originates from digital design and it's focused on product design as well. Adobe XD, although Figma and Adobe is the same company now. And in the past there was Sketch, and InVision is another product that's being used. That's just to name a few, but there's so many different tools out there. Nevertheless, UX designers focuses on that process that I was saying earlier, and the tools are just there to help them optimize the process. Now, since I've been speaking about the process, let's dive deeper into the process, specifically the design process and what the difference may be between a graphic designer and a UX designer. A graphic designer typically goes with a linear process. It feels a little bit more waterfall in comparison to UX designer. A graphic designer starts with a brief, and then they will follow up with an ideation process, whether it's sketching, brainstorming, things like that. And from there, they'll mock up or create some visual concepts. And from there, normally a graphic designer will get a client to approve it, do some presentations and whatnot. And then finally from there, they will roll out into the final product. And if it's a print type of project, they will then get into pre-press and making sure that the file is fit for print purposes. A UX designer goes through a process that is a bit more iterative. There's a lot of iterative cycle in the process. So it includes things like researching, and based on the research and the findings, they will ideate, concepts and different types of approaches. And from there, they might wireframe or prototype, whether it's low fidelity or high fidelity, depending on what the needs are. And oftentimes the budget as well. So UX designers would prototype and then test that prototype and see what actually is worth pursuing. There are different methods of testing as well. You could spend lots and lots of times to test, or you could spend a set period of time, whether it's just a day, a couple of hours, depending on what method is. From the findings that you get out of the testing, then UX designers would refine it, and that's when it goes through another cycle and potentially request for more user feedback. And ideally, in a lean process, they want to get into a stage where the business or them as a UX designer or the different stakeholders are confident with the idea that's being proposed, and then they'll move forward into whether it's implementation or another part of the production, depending on what the project is. Now, let's also address the commonalities between a graphic designer and a UX designer. First and foremost, they're both designers, so oftentimes they sometimes come from the same background, which is the graphic design or communication design. But essentially, they're both designing for emotions. They both design a connection between their product and its audience. The medium is the only difference, but nevertheless, they both focus on the so-called user experience, depending on whatever it is. A brand experience is oftentimes part of it as well. They just have a slightly different focus, but they both design for emotions. Both graphic designers and UX designers actually prototype as well. So graphic designers may prototype, a brochure. They might come up with some concepts, do some test prints, try to compile it, get a feel of it. They might also get a printer to work with them, as an example, to produce a prototype of the work that they're doing to make sure that it feels right. Whereas UX designers will do the same, but potentially more in the digital side of things. So they'll prototype, clickable mocks, a couple of screens that get stitched up together, and use that for user testing, as an example. Creativity is obviously a very common thing between the two, because they're both designers and they need creative thinking as part of the process to help them innovate the ideas and try to push that down the line to make sure that the work gets done and up to scratch. Now, you'd be interested in what the salary is like, don't you? Typically, UX designers make a little bit more than graphic designers, I would say. In Australia, and this is just based on Glassdoor data, but on average, graphic designers can make about 70K a year, and UX designers might make up to 85K a year. And let's just say that's to start off with. And it just goes, with experience and portfolio, and depending on who you work for, it goes up from there. In the US, the gap is a little bit bigger, and based on Glassdoor data as well, graphic designers are about 50K a year to start off with. That's US dollars. UX designers could actually double that up to 100K. I would say that's because the industry is a bit more mature, and maybe there's more competition as well when it comes to the skill set in the US. So now that we've gotten here, if you're thinking about switching from you currently being a graphic designer into UX designer, and you're wondering what is it that companies are searching for within the UX designer, the most important thing is human-centered understanding. So understanding, you can empathize with a user's needs and be able to translate that into products and visually appealing design as well, that is usable, that is accessible. That would be a high value for most companies. The other thing is a strong portfolio. So to get into the door, you need real world projects, or even if you have nothing, if you're starting off from scratch, just create projects on your own, try self-initiated projects just to showcase your capability as a UX designer. The process is one thing that you want to highlight, so don't focus on just the visual design aspect of it, but focus on the process and on how you got there. User research and usability testing is the other thing that is a needed skill when it comes to companies looking for UX designers. So some sort of an experience in that, running user interviews, surveys, knowing where and how to extract meaningful insights out of an interview or survey is an important one. Other skills are things like wireframing, so that's an essential UX design skill. And wireframing comes with prototyping and as well as UI design, so user interface design. Most graphic designers will definitely have UI design skills in their pocket already. So the things that you may want to improve is just being able to link the process from wireframing, prototyping, and finally visual design or UI design. Another intangible skill that is actually very important is the ability for you to collaborate and communicate well. Oftentimes UX design projects can be a little bit more complex, or you're working within a cross-functional team environment. You're working together with not just other designers, but product managers, developers, marketers, different types of stakeholders. And so the ability for you to be able to communicate, put your ideas on the table, be able to rationalize with other perspectives and collaborate together is actually a very important one. I was talking about how complex UX design projects can be, so being able to solve problems is another important skill that you can have. You can identify users' pain points, be able to analyze complex design problems, and then coming up with practical solutions to address that problem to improve the user experience is an important thing to have as a UX designer. Other basic UX design principles such as visual hierarchy, color theory, information architecture, and layout are oftentimes an important thing, or if not, is a must-have that companies are looking for when they're hiring for UX designers. Being able to adapt and be nimble, because there's a lot of change management that happens in a UX design project, oftentimes is an important one as well. Be able to be open-minded and embracing different perspectives, different tools, ideas that's being brought to the table is an important aspect to have as a UX designer. Last but not least, having some sort of an industry knowledge, being able to show your passion and your understanding of where things are going is always important, because that shows the company that you're interested, you're genuinely interested in this field, and that you're naturally a curious designer that would teach yourself so many different things along the path, and that you will obviously learn more and improve as time goes by. Okay, now that we've spoken about the differences, the things that companies are looking for from a UX designer, let's talk about the main point of this video, which is how do you make that switch from a graphic designer into a UX designer? So the good news is it is actually doable. It's not going to be too difficult, because you would be able to leverage the skills that you have as a graphic designer, mainly from a visual design perspective. You would already have UI design skills with you. The things that you need to focus on is, first and foremost, is understanding the methodologies, essentially the principles of UX design, and understand the process of it. Some of the other things that would definitely help you become a UX designer is understand the brands that you like. Just genuinely study their UX, be curious about the good things that they do when it comes to user experience. I mean, the word user experience is not a difficult thing to understand, isn't it? It's really just a better user experience for the audience. So think about the things that could be done better. Another thing that can help you is maybe learn from others, and you can do this by taking a UX course, for example. There's so many different ones out there. There's General Assembly, here in Australia at the very least, is one of the more popular ones. Google has Coursera as well. You will learn things like researching, wireframing, prototyping, usability testing, things that are very close or quite essential to UX design. So you can take the leap into doing short courses like that. And start building your portfolio, because otherwise it's very hard to get into the door and just get an opportunity. So you want to give yourself at least a couple of good projects, and they don't have to be real. If they're real, then that's great. If not, you can always create a project on your own, or kind of like redo and take the initiative of a different brand, or using a different brand and kind of like recreate their website. Just remember, go through the process and include the process as part of your portfolio. The other thing that I find is very helpful is when you go out and meet and connect with relevant people who are already in the field, and just learn more from them. Go to meetups, or if you're an introvert like me, you can just go through LinkedIn and really connect with other people in the UX field, or follow different channels, different Instagram accounts, LinkedIn accounts, YouTube accounts that specifically talks about UX, that will teach you a lot of things. I was saying that if you don't have any project, then you can always start fresh. The other thing that you can do is actually freelance on the side, do a side hustle thing as a UX designer while your main job is a graphic designer. That also builds your portfolio. What you can do as well is when you have a graphic design project, let's say someone's hired you to design a website, offer them an added value in the process where they can go through a UX design process when you're designing a website for them. That will also help you build that portfolio when it comes to UX design. And if you're working in a company as a graphic designer, you could always do the same. You could offer an extended service or an extended scope to your employer or your client in the company that includes a little bit of UX design component in it, whether it's research, whether it's a user testing, or whether it's just a simple prototyping method, that sort of thing. Obviously, you want to be conscious about the budget and the time that you spent when you're working in a company, but think about something that is low risk, that will bring a lot of value, but it requires lower effort from your side. So you don't have to do the whole process, just pick one or two and include that as part of your process while you're graphic designing something. If you're a traditional graphic designer heavily on the Adobe Creative Suite, invest more on things like Figma, because that's really the standard at the moment as I'm speaking. That's the standard when it comes to UX or UI design tools or digital design tools. So invest in that. I believe they have some free accounts that you could trial or use within a limited number of projects. So do that, force yourself to jump into the platform and just try on different projects, because that will do you some favor. And if you have some free time, dive deeper into the different methodologies of user research, because there's so many of them. You could really spend months and months trying to understand user research. There's different methods, different approaches and ways and tools and all of that. So it can be quite overwhelming, but start simple. All you're trying to do is understand the user a little bit more. You're trying to just get their feedback. So things like interviews, surveys, usability testing, using tools like TestMate is oftentimes helpful as well. But essentially what you're trying to do is understand how to gather insights and how to analyze them and how to be able to use them or apply them into your design. And stay on top of the news and trends, because oftentimes from there you learn a lot of new things to uncover, new things to follow. What are the leaders in the industry are doing right now? What does the customer want right now? Things like that will really help you and understand on how to be a better UX designer in your pathway. So that's actually something that you want to do continuously, even if you're already a UX designer. Things like that will obviously help. And of course, consume things like blogs, podcasts, contents, other publications that really helps you be up to date with the current trends in industry as well. All right, guys, so I hope that was helpful, but the most important thing is don't overwhelm yourself, because obviously we went through a lot in this video. I'm trying to give you all of the spiels in terms of the things that could help you jump into becoming a UX designer from a graphic designer. But the main thing is really you just need to keep learning, keep trying, never give up, and always be open. Always be open-minded with the process, because it changes. In this environment that we live in, things change so quickly that you just need to adapt to it. And be very open for it. So yeah, good luck in applying for your jobs and see where you land at the end of the day. Tell me about it and let me know if I've missed anything as well, because that's very helpful. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us. We're going to post a new video every week from now on, and I'll see you around. Thank you.